Greetings fellow earthlings and welcome to this tiny garage. Welcome back everybody. If you are just joining us, then last week we were lucky enough to get the engine and transmission combo bolted up into this Porsche. But we're not going to go very far if we don't connect all the various hoses and wires that join them together. Now let's get on with it.
The air conditioning compressor is our first victim. There it is right there, and that space is where it's supposed to fit. In the back are the fuel cooling lines. They go through the AC to cool the fuel, which is kind of cool. And then that is the vacuum line for the fuel pressure regulator. That needs to get out of the way somehow. Those are the main wiring harness connectors. They need to move out of the way as well. To start with, I'm just gonna kind of fling it in there and see what happens. I took out that vacuum line for now so I don't mangle it. It's going to be pretty easy to put back on later. I'm moving that B plus junction box just to give me a bit more space. I'd like to move that wiring bracket, but we'll leave it in for now. In order to get more access to those fuel lines with my huge hands, I think we're going to have to regress to make progress and take off that throttle body. If I were doing this job again, I would leave the AC compressor attached to the engine and disconnect it from the car. It didn't seem like the electrical connector was going to be able to fit inside this brown plastic sleeve, but it does. If you put it in at an angle and slide it all the way down, it will join the other end of the connector. Right, now I got it more or less in position, we can see that there just isn't much space to put your hands in there, especially not my huge hands. So anyway, plan C. I'm going to take out that center intake distributor to give me more space, if I can get it out. I took the AC compressor off because I wanted to be a good person and not release that freon into the air. If I was doing this again, I would recommend you bring your car to a specialist and get the AC system checked and then emptied. That way you can just leave the AC compressor with the engine, and that really would be easier overall. Okay, here I did get good access to those fuel lines that go into the AC compressor. 17mm on those guys. There isn't space for a torque wrench in here, and so I assume they should be torqued to around 30 Newton meters. If I tighten them as tight as I can with these short wrenches, I know that that's going to be around 30 Newton meters. These are the bolts for the AC compressor. The long one is the weird one that goes in the back. So just getting these guys in place. I'm putting the two front ones in because I figure if they're in place loosely, that's kind of going to line up the one in the back. Alright, using my borescope, and there is our friend there. That's the target for that long bolt that has to go down sort of through the plastic intake manifold. And that's it. So then we need to get a 13mm onto that. A 6mm extension is perfect for getting access to that bolt. Snagging all of those up to begin with. And then those all are tightened to 23 Newton meters. And then tucking the AC wire in place behind the AC compressor.
I would like if you would hit the like button.
Engine temperature probe. Are you ready for something simple that turns into a nightmare? Here we go. It's this little plastic sensor, and it clips into the plastic intake manifold right above where we connected that bolt for the AC compressor. Now, I pushed it in, and the little rubber grommet that it fits on fell down into the engine. Normally, of course, I would use my magnetic picker-upper, but this is rubber. And so I tried a stick with tape on the end. No. I tried a little hooky thing on the end of my borescope. No. My last-ditch effort was to tape a hose to my vacuum cleaner and see if I could suck it to safety. And many heart-pumping moments later. And there we go. There is that little bugger. Now let's try that again. The answer then, if you're in this position, is to use two hands. My right hand is underneath the grommet, stopping it from getting pushed through, and my left hand is pushing the sensor into the grommet. Alright, the Serpentine Belt. Named because of this. Now, I was worried that I'd put it on the wrong way around. It turns out if you can read the word Porsche, you're good. To get the Serpentine Belt in position, I just kind of start somewhere. Here I'm at the alternator, and then working across to the upper idler pulley, then the power steering pump, then across to the AC compressor that we just put on. Now going down to the crank where all this stuff is actually getting its power from. And then we're going to go around the tensioner pulley. And that's the spring-loaded one that allows us to get this belt on, ultimately. That's the one that moves. And next to it is the lower idler pulley. The idler pulleys don't do anything, they just spin, hence the name. And then we're going down to the water pump at the very bottom of the engine there. Getting the belt past the rear engine carrier is a little awkward. I chose to deploy my third hand, and that really made short work of it. The final step is putting a 24mm socket onto that tensioner pulley so that we can push against that tension and get some slack for final positioning of the belt. Next we can put the B plus junction box back together with those 10mm, and those are tight but not torqued. Putting that vacuum hose for the fuel pressure regulator back in place. Power steering reservoir. So the power steering pump, we put it back on, but the reservoir is sort of the separate piece. Again, taking off that center intake distributor is very helpful when you're trying to get that on and off. Now to get the center intake distributor back on, I had to take off one side of those cuffs. It's a very tight fit in there, of course. And with that, it was just about possible to squeeze it all back together and get it, where it should be. I just found another use for a plastic trim tool that is not trim related. Employing my third hand there again. Then tightening up the hose clamps there, they're all 7mm. Now that we've tidied up our mess, we can move on to fresh pastures. Hold on, what's the dog doing? Oh yeah, subscribe now. Delta says thank you. The fuel tank vent line is as simple as that, just clip it together. The brake booster vacuum line, we're going to have to go back and put a real vacuum line on that, folks, but for now, to start the engine it will work. You put that little grey spacer in there, and that makes it that hose can't escape. Like the power steering clips, this is another one of those things that's very, very simple looking. But all the scratches and scrapes on my hands are from this. If I had my time over again, I would probably put these on before I put the engine in. But, hindsight and all that. So there they are. They just push onto these two spikes that come down from the roof and you clip the pipes in. Easy to say, frustrating to do. Okay, the engine wiring harness is just those two wiring harness round things. They have a triangle that you have to line up. You can't get in the wrong way round. They are like unique in their own way. So once you get them orientated, they just rotate righty-tighty, and that's it. Now the B plus junction box that takes that big power cable to the starter motor and the alternator, it takes its power from this cable that was remaining with the car. There's a 13mm on there, again, tight, not torqued. Then I'm replacing the zip tie for the wiring harness that holds it onto the side of the engine compartment. Now the ground strap for the engine, and that is on the passenger side here. Even if I'm not showing it, all of these electrical things are getting a wire brushing and some electronic spray before they get connected. The ground strap has a 13mm nut on it and it is torqued to 23 Newton meters. Okay, my arch nemesis, the backup light switch. This almost killed me first time because of that tab. If you know that tab's there and you pull that out and lift it up, it's easy. But the way it's hidden from you when it's installed makes it tricky. And that's what you're plugging it into. It's easy to do now. All right, the fuel lines. We're not going to do much without some fuel. That is the supply line. That is a 19mm that you should tighten to 30 Newton meters. I'm putting a dab of blue thread locker on the return line there with a screwdriver just because it's difficult to reach. And then tightening that 17mm to 25 Newton meters. Here's a crankcase breather hose. This is the return line from the diaphragm on the AOS system, the air oil separator. The coolant returns to the system via the triple hose. To connect the hose to the oil cooler, I got a new one of these official Porsche 7mm hose clamps. And that connects the oil cooler or heat exchanger on the passenger side of the engine back to the cooling system.
Hit the notification bell, it's up there.
Yes, please.
All right, going up. Time for the rest of the coolant stuff. Here's the other end of that triple hose, as it's called. This large coolant hose is coming from the radiators at the front of the car and will allow the coolant back into the engine if the thermostat is warm enough to be open. Tightening up that 7mm hose clamp there, and with all the hose clamps I'm trying to be nice to my future self and leave them in a position where they're easy to get at. The top hose is the return from the heater core, and the bottom hose is the feed for the water pump, really where the coolant for the engine goes in. Using that Craftsman hose clamp, an essential tool for this job. Alright, next up then, the headers and the catalytic converters. This is how I kind of took them off. I put them onto this table and lowered them. So my plan is to go backwards, right? Those wires are for the O2 sensors. There's 2 of them so that the computer can compare the readings like before and after the cats, so to speak. Using some wood to try to get the angle right. A little bit awkward. It's quite heavy in the big scheme of things. And so then putting in these gaskets that I got in the gasket kit in episode 24. That gasket kit was definitely a good idea. Alright, so here we go, putting a bolt in. These are the old bolts, but this is California. They're actually in pretty good condition. My plan is to use the old bolts to install the exhaust system and get it all in place, and then I'll replace them one at a time with brand new lovely bolts. So here's the deal. You try to get that gasket lined up, try to get the hole on the head lined up with the header, and then bring in one of those 13mm bolts up with a wing and a prayer and trying to see if you can get it in, but no. Really, the whole rig is just too unwieldy. What I decided to do is try to reduce the weight I'm dealing with. So here I want to take off this clamp that would separate the headers from the catalytic converters. I know going in that this is going to be problematic, so I'm using all my tools. WD-40 and fire. And still no, I could feel that I was going to round this thing off or snap something off before that nut was going to come loose. I guess we're on to plan C. I'm just going to take off the other half of the exhaust and put on the driver's side first. So once raised into position there, I was able to get one of those bolts onto the rear engine carrier into position, and that was a great start. That helped me get the second one into position. Then I'm moving that hammer that had, ER visit written all over it. Time to put the gasket back in. I'm trying to get a bolt in, and that was much more successful. So I knew I was onto something then. But then really there's no future in having the hydraulic table there if I'm going to get bolts in. So I zip tied the headers to the muffler mounts, and that really worked quite well. It kind of got it all kind of close so that it wasn't fighting me too much. Once I was able to get that second bolt in, I was feeling like this was going to work. I'm not putting those bolts in tight, I'm just putting them all in kind of loose. And I'm using that wrench there to bend the headers into the position I want. That was a handy technique. Once I got all of those 6 bolts in loosely, I decided to move across to the other side. Same plan really. Those catalytic converters get tucked up very tight underneath the bumper. So getting some more zip tie action there. And then just doing up that one clamp that joins the two sides of the exhaust together, the catalytic converters and headers, and just a 13mm on there. And we can get the hydraulic table out of the way. And then I found using that as kind of a screwdriver, like a Torx screwdriver thing, to line up the gasket and all the holes and everything was kind of helpful. And then just trying to ram a bolt into it. And that worked surprisingly well. So nothing really to report. All the holes felt pretty good. All the bolts felt pretty good. Now when we're back under here draining the run-in oil, I'll replace these all individually with brand new bolts, and that way they'll be all unmangled and up to torque and lovely for the next person. And all those bolts are going to get torqued to 23 Newton meters. All right, now that the catalytic converters are on, we can connect the O2 sensors. Here we are on the back of the passenger side. You're not going to get them mixed up. There's a grey one and a black one. You connect the black one to the black one. Oh, and the grey one to the grey one. And then that little red lock thing holds that in position, and then you slot it into the plastic mount there. And it all just looks like really cool. I was pleased with that. Much easier than I thought. And then that wire goes into its little moulding. Now here we are on the driver's side. Same thing. Moving on. This is a remnant from when I just realized what the difference was between bank 1 and bank 2, so we can take that off now. All right, here's my shiny new stainless steel Fabspeed mufflers that I didn't know I had. I look forward to hearing what they sound like. Besides looking pretty, they're supposed to give 12 more horsepower, 10 more torques, and 7 less pounds in weight. Okay, smog pump, we're getting close. The smog pump is literally a fan that allows fresh air to be mixed with the combustion gases on startup and keep the environment happy. We got 3 10mm going to 10 Newton meters. The bolt on the left hand side is difficult to reach, and so I'm using a universal joint adapter to get that socket into place. Okay, plug that one in and we're on. Airbox. Now those little rubber grommets fit those spikes on the bottom of the airbox, so it just sort of sits in place there on top of those. Then really that one 10mm, which is holding that into position, 10 Newton meters on that guy. There's the old air filter and the new one that I got. Of course, I've never driven this car. It's never ran in the time I've owned it, so I don't know how long that filter was in there. Then just a bunch of Phillips heads all the way around that airbox. Not really torquing them, just getting everything nice and snug. And then finishing up on the airbox by connecting the intake tube here to the throttle body with a hose clamp that is going to have a 7mm socket on it. This part of the airbox allows the engine to suck in fresh air from the outside world through the vents in the rear wing. Then we just need to connect the mass airflow connector on the passenger side there, and that's it, looking more or less like it should. Engine fluids. All right, let's put some lifeblood in this engine. I'm being pretty conservative here. As you can see, I'm using the Porsche coolant on the right with the Porsche power steering fluid next to that, some Porsche brake fluid next to that, and then that mobil oil is right in the middle of what everybody recommends. Here we go with our first gallon of this pink coolant. Apparently the same kind of thing as they use in Audis. It's a 50-50 mix with this distilled water. I'm using the bottles to kind of mix them as much as possible. Then that is a purge valve. See, when I open that, it all gurgles into the engine, which is nice. So I just kept filling it as that level went down. I got about 2 gallons of 50-50 mix distilled water and coolant into the system before the gurgling stopped and it wouldn't let me fill anymore. As the engine runs, of course, and the thermostat opens, it's going to take a bunch more. Next then, engine oil, 5W30. Regular Mobil. This is going to get thrown away, of course, after, I don't know, 500 miles or so. It's going to be our run-in oil. And then just checking the level there till we get as close to the top as possible. Again, that's going to change as soon as this engine starts running. It's going to start dragging that oil into itself and the level will go down. Next then, power steering fluid, which is hydraulic oil. I used about 750 milliliters of that to fill it first time around. It's over full right now, but of course that level is going to go down as the power steering pump draws that fluid into the system. Alright, according to Ricardo Baptista and the detailed instructions he sent me, I have to disconnect the fuel pump relay, which sadly is not there, which means it's there. Now I know now it's that one. Here's some insight into what that felt like. Then in my inverted confusion, I accidentally pressed the slow-mo button.
Grab the right one, everybody. Is there any way of ever knowing?
Turns out, thankfully, I had grabbed the right one. It's a cracker. Hopefully now no fuel will go to the engine, so we can spin it with the starter and try to build some oil pressure before actually firing it up. Alright, connecting the battery. This is like what we did on day one. It's been on a trickle charger for most of the day. Anyway, so cleaning the terminals up with that wire brush device and some electronic cleaner. Putting in those chemically treated little coloured pads to reduce corrosion buildup. 10 millimeters to connect those. Put the cover on, put down. Oh look, it's a key with a great keychain that got sent to me by Roberto at TunerS Motorsports. Notice how we're on 11 volts there. Let's see what happens. Ooh, something. Round 2. Stray woodpecker. Alright, now that could mean that the engine's seized. And while I'm not a mechanic, I've owned enough cars to know that that probably means there's not enough power to run the starter. Yeah, 9.36 volts. That's not enough volts. Alright, I put my big boy pants on and charged that battery overnight, and here we go again. See, we're still getting 11 volts. And no better than last night. Oh dear. So battery again. So it's now getting just under 12 volts, but still, it's a 12 volt battery. We should have at least 12 volts out of it. Here's a new Duralast battery from the local auto parts store. And my daughter graciously agreed to notify me of any leaks or fire during the startup process.
Sorry, absolutely nothing happened.
It's okay, I didn't do anything really good.
Nothing.
Then looking on the right there for oil pressure, not really anything yet.
Nothing.
It's all good, nothing is good.
See anything?
Have a look down underneath and all that?
Yeah, every time I go a little...
Oh, you do? Okay, cool.
I don't see anything going on.
Good. Gonna do one more of those. I'm coming back.
Nothing.
The oil level was down less than a half quart.
Yeah, see there?
Oh, okay.
So it's down ever so slightly.
As luck would have it, no leaks and no flames.
3, 2, or 1.
Nothing.
Here we go again. I'm just running it slightly longer this time.
Alright.
I was hoping for some more oil pressure by now.
Nothing's going on.
All right, fuel relay is in. Are we ready?
Yes. Try this. Nothing.
Fair enough.
Oh, it smells bad though.
Oh yeah, we got some oil pressure.
It smells horrible back here.
I promise we have an extractor system running in the tiny garage with the door open.
Turned on. But nothing happened. Oh, it smells horrible.
As soon as we got any smoke, we would bug out of there for a few minutes and let the extractor fans do their job. And then for the rest of this, I did outfit my daughter with a respirator.
So was there much smoke?
All right, we checked the oil one more time. The power steering level was pretty low, so we topped that back up also.
All right, then here we go then. Wow.
You said I wouldn't smell anything.
Little lumpy. Plenty of oil pressure. So there, we just exited the building for a few minutes till the air had a chance to freshen up again.
Okay, here we go again.
Each time I started it, it seemed to get a little smoother. The engine has kind of a truck to it, like some sort of funny car. I'm sure it's not supposed to have that, but it sounds kind of cool.
You okay? Okay, let's get out of here.
This is a little later on. Once we realized there wasn't going to be any leaks or flames, I let my daughter go back to her Minecraft and ran the engine for a solid 2 minutes straight. You can see in the camera and hear in the engine that it's still running a little lumpy. Perhaps it's something that will fix itself as the engine computer gleans fresh data from the engine sensors. Perhaps I screwed something up that we're going to have to go in there and fix, but one way or the other it is running, and I'm going to take that as a win for now.
Yes, that is a major milestone. Thank you to everybody for all of your help over the last year. I've never done anything like this before, and I could not have done it without all of your help. So thank you so much. But as you'll notice, we're still not driving the car. We haven't connected the transmission to the wheels. We haven't put the suspension parts back on that we took off to get the engine out. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Till next time.
Just gonna be doing the same thing?
Exactly. Oh,